What's up everybody, my name is Will from Ghosthack and welcome to an extremely nerdy video. Today I, Will from Ghosthack, a certified nerd, will teach you how you can effectively create your own effects plugins inside of FL Studio's Patcher. Now this process of kind of designing essentially a custom effect plugin inside of Patcher can get a little bit complicated. So I decided not to create one or take one that I've already created and just go through what I've already done. I thought that would actually be more confusing than if I just did it in the video. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to create one in the video today, and it's going to be pretty unedited, maybe some edits here and there, but I wanted to leave it pretty unedited and raw so you can really see the process of doing this. And I'll do every little thing and explain what I'm doing. So I have a little hip hop drum loop here. And basically what I'm going to do is I want to take that drum loop and I want to telephone it. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, it basically means I want to make it sound like it's coming through like a phone speaker, like an old phone. I want to make it sound, you know, like not super high frequency. I want to kind of lo-fi it. I want to take out the low end, make it sound like it's kind of just an old recording playing out of a crappy speaker. And that effect is used a lot in a lot of different genres. And I think it would be interesting to create a kind of effect plugin inside of Patcher that will allow me to actually control the depth of that effect as well. Now what most people would do is they would just throw an EQ on it that might look like that, and that would kind of telephone it. It would sort of take out those low frequencies and high frequencies and make it sound kind of weak. But I want to do a little more than that. I want to really weaken it up a little more. I want to add an EQ such as that, but I also want to add a little bit of room with the reverb to kind of give it space, but also make the sound itself a little more mono. I want to add some other things on top of it, and I want to be able to control some parameters with the knobs in Patcher. So that's going to be kind of the game plan for today, and I'm going to plan to do this in a timely manner, but still explain everything that I'm doing. But real quick, before I hop into that, I also want to just kind of showcase a few of the other plugins that I've made using Patcher. So I have a couple here. The first one I made is actually one that I called Instant Riser, and it's a knob that I can add to my risers to make my drops hit a little harder, and just hear what it does to this drum loop. What it's done is it has added a little bit of room reverb to kind of wash it out. It's also added a high pass, so you cut the low frequencies. It's ducked a little bit of the high frequencies, and it also made the sound more mono, so you don't have any super stereo sound. And I can control the reverb level here. I also made a plugin that I called Growler to help me add vowelness to my growls. Obviously this won't sound that great on a drum loop, but you can see how that would be kind of relevant for a growl bass. It just adds like voweliness. And the third thing I added was actually this one right here, which adds white noise on top of anything you run through this plugin. And this one got a little crazier because I used a Fruity Peak controller. But I don't think I'm going to touch on that much today. I think I'm going to build something maybe a little less complicated than this, sort of from scratch, so you can see what I'm doing. So I know that was a pretty long intro to this. I just really wanted to preface exactly what I'm going for in case it's like confusing at all to anyone who's first getting into Patcher, because Patcher can be used very simply. We actually have a video of how I use Patcher much more simply than this, but it can also be very complex if you get into it and really extract everything you can do from it. So the first thing is that we're going to hear no sound, because I need to make sure that this thing is going from the input to the output. So now the sound is traveling down that line. And the first thing I want to do if I'm trying to make something sound like it's telephoned is add an EQ. So let's add plugin parametric EQ2, and let's connect it to this chain. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the shape that I want. I could choose from these presets here. You see we have old telephone, which is actually clipping right now. Probably throw a limiter on the master chain to make sure it doesn't clip. Yeah, like that. Or maybe the radio one. I'm pretty sure they have a radio. Yeah, radio. I could use that, but I think I want to kind of make my own. So I'm going to start like this, which is just one that I made that has a low pass and a high pass built in. So start with the high pass filter. Sounds like an old telephone speaker. And now let's get the high pass filter in. This one can be a little softer. Or maybe it can be harsher. That sounds a little more like what it would be if it's from like an old telephone. Okay, so this is pretty much what we want here. See how I brought this down to like -6 to make sure that the peak doesn't go over 0 dB? That's kind of by design. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find a way to be able to bring this guy down back where it was, this guy right here up back where it was, and then the whole thing back up here where it was, but in one fluid motion with a knob. That's what I want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the surface, which this is the surface right here. You can double click on it to get to it, or you can just go into the surface. This is where all your knobs and controllers are going to be. So I'm going to add a knob. I'm not really going to worry about style. I'm just going to choose like the default stuff. They have tons of styles to choose from, and it's a lot of fun actually. But I'm just going to go ahead and I have a knob. And then I can click this right here and boom, we have a knob functioning. And you also see in the map that we now have this little red thing connected to the surface. And that's the knob. That's what's showing up right there, is saying, hey, there's a controller here. You know, it has a little controller attached to it, and we can apply stuff to this. Now, this is basically how it would go just from a simple perspective. Let's say I wanted to control this high pass filter with this knob. What I could do is I could right click it and I could hit activate. And you see there's another little red dot, and that's saying, this plugin saying, hey, we have a little controller here, or in this case, a thing that is open to being controlled. And now the easy thing to do would just be to connect the red dots. And when I control this knob, you can see I'm controlling the high pass filter. But the problem is, when it goes all the way up, I don't want this high pass filter to be all the way up. That seems kind of dumb to me. I want it to be like closer to there. Now, how can I do that? Well, there are a couple things that will help you do that. Basically, what you have to do is you have to add something in between this red line that will allow you to control the range of motion that you are actually controlling. For example, I want it to be all the way down and then go up to about here. So I want to be able to cut all of this out and just narrow down the range of motion. And there are a couple plugins that will allow you to do this. The first plugin, let me show the plugin picker here. First plugin, and the one I probably use the most for this, would be the Fruity Envelope Controller right here. And the reason I use Envelope Controller the most is it allows you to actually control a bunch of things at once, right? It allows you to control like 8 different things. You see there's 8 different parameters here. You can switch. It's like 8 different versions of this envelope controller just in one plugin. It's very nice. You can also use the Fruity XY controller, which I can pull up right here. Fruity XY controller and the Fruity XYZ controller if you wanted to. And that does pretty much the same thing. I can control the range. You see like minimum and maximum of these controls, but I feel like the Fruity Envelope Controller generally gives you a little more control over what you're doing. You know, you can really get in and mess around with these lines, envelopes, LFOs, good stuff, and allows you to control a bunch at once. So you don't have to have a ton of Fruity Envelope controllers everywhere, because you can do like 8 in one, and that's very nice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add this Fruity Envelope Controller, and you'll see, how are we supposed to connect this? There are no red lines. That's the first problem we encounter. And what we have to do is we have to basically activate these controls right here, because these controls are just sitting here. They're not connected to anything. We need to activate them the same way we'd activate like any other knob in any other plugin like we did with the EQ. So I'm going to say modulation X right here in this XY controller. We're going to activate it. So I'm going to activate, and there we can see an output, and that's ready to be connected to a knob right here. So that's good. But how do we connect this right here to the envelope controller? What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set this output. We're going to have to set an output controllers articulator 1. right here. So we've basically enabled this first articulator. You can see there's 8 of these articulators. We've enabled the first one, and that's given us our little dot. So now the first one's ready to get set up here. So we connected this high pass filter to the first articulator, and we've said modulation X of this first articulator is getting controlled by the knob. So now you can see that knob controls modulation X. So we're getting somewhere. Now these are connected. And now if I play the sound, you see that nothing happens. That's our next problem. Why has this not worked? What has gone wrong in the middle? Well, firstly, what we're going to have to do is we don't want the envelope here. The envelope works when something is triggered. This isn't really triggering anything. What we need to do is we need to go to modulation X mapping, because as you can see, we're using modulation X. We just connected modulation X to the knob. We need to go to modulation X mapping. And now when I move this knob, you can see the white line moving, right? So that's what we're doing. And this line right here represents how much the control is actually being controlled. Like if I wanted to control it 100%, I'd set the range to 100%. And when modulation X is all the way down and this knob is all the way down, the control that we're controlling will be all the way down in this spectrum. And then when I turn all the way up, the knob is all the way up, and the control that we're controlling, in this case, the high pass filter, will be all the way up. And you would think if you played that, you would see that happening, but you don't. That's because there's one more thing you have to do. You have to go here and you have to hit continuous output. And that makes sure that it is always just controlling this signal 100% of the time. Now we're controlling that high pass filter. And that works very well. But see, this is the important part, is that we don't want it to look like this. This was just the default thing that we had when we first connected the high pass filter to this knob. What's even the point of this envelope controller? The point is that you can bring it down here. And now I can say that 100% of the knob is actually only 50% of this EQ. You see it stopped at 50% here. If I control this knob, there it is. It's only 50% of the EQ. It stops right there because the envelope controller is telling it to stop halfway. So now we can go like this. And that's exactly what we want. We just have to find the spot in this spectrum that we want it to stay. I like it about right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this value. I'm going to right click, copy the value. Then we're going to go into the envelope controller and we're going to paste the value, 38%. So there it is. This will go from 0% to 38% of that high pass filter. So that's great. We have that one mapped to this knob. And the next thing we want to do is connect the high pass to this knob in exactly the same way. So what have we learned? All right, well, first we have to make sure we have a knob set up to do it. Donezo. We have the knob open right here. And the next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to edit this to be activated. So let's hit activate. And there's the controller ready to be controlled. And now we can't, again, like we did before, we can't just directly connect it to this knob. We're going to have to connect it to the Fruity envelope controller, but we don't want it connected to the same articulator 1 here, because that's going to really mess it up. We don't want this line on ours. We want to make a different line. So what we have to do is we have to go into articulator 2. You can see we can switch back from 1 to 2, and all the other ones, they all still remain active. You see how that one's yellow right there? It still remains active. It doesn't go away. We're just switching our view, basically. So now we can see here that this X is already activated. You see, when I right click, it says activate, because the modulation X's, they all move in exactly the same. And when I move modulation X with this knob, I'm moving all of the modulation X's for all the articulators, right? And that's good because we want all of this routed to the same knob. So that's completely fine. What we need to do is we need to select a new output. So let's say outputs, controllers, articulator 2, because we're working with a new articulator. And now we can go ahead and connect the EQ to articulator 2. We connected this one right here to articulator 2. And now we have to set the range at which it's working. We want it to be at this spot when the knob that I'm turning on the surface is at its maximum value. So let's go ahead and let's, well, it's already activated. Let's copy the value, all right? And let's go into the envelope controller, articulator 2, and let's say when modulation X is all the way at the top, right? When it's at its highest point, let's paste the value at 83. So this is where we want it to be. It's going to be at 83% when the knob is all the way up. It's going to be right there. But when we turn the knob down, we don't want this low pass filter to go down. We want the low pass filter to go up, to open up as we turn the knob down. So what we have to do is we have to say when modulation X is at 0%, this low pass filter is at 100% right here. So it goes from 100% down to 83%. And now you can see we're controlling both with this knob. There, now we're really making progress. And we've kind of already just telephoned this sound, but there's a couple more things I want to do here. First thing I want to do is I want to change this, what's it called? Resonance. I want to change the resonance because right now the resonance is at about here. I want to bring it down to like normal, right? Because when the knob is all the way down, I don't want it to be affecting this high end. But here's the problem, right? Look at where I'm at. Look at kind of what I've done here. When I bring the knob down, you can still see these things rolling off at the edges. That's not good. That's not what I wanted at all. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm actually going to have to change these shapes. Fortunately, this isn't going to mess with our modulation at all. All I have to do is go in here and change the shape of it. I want this to be a little more like that. So it's a little tighter here. So it's not going down as much. And with this high end, I'm going to have to change this shape so it looks a little more like this. We just have to make sure that we get these pretty even. And then I want this resonance to come up. As a matter of fact, I feel like I can actually turn down the high pass a little bit. Let's bring it down to about here. You see this high pass is a little less sharp, so we're going to have to bring it down a little lower. As a matter of fact, we can bring up this high pass a little bit as well. So we get kind of an extreme telephone. It's a pretty extreme telephone. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it being extreme when the knob is all the way up, because again, we can make it less extreme by just turning the knobs down a little bit. So that's all good. The next thing I want to control is the resonance, and we can do this exactly the same way we did the other two knobs. So let's take this resonance, let's right click and let's activate, and then I'm going to copy the value. I think that's right over where my head is actually. So basically I just right clicked, activated, and then I copy this value. So now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to right click outputs and add a new articulator. This is going to be articulator 3. And again, this is going to be controlled by the same knob. So we're just going through exactly the same modulation X here. So let's go into articulator 3 that we just activated. And when the knob is at 100% all the way up, we want it to be at the value that we copied, 34%. That's the resonance that we just did right there. So when the knob is all the way up, as it is right now, the resonance will be right there. And then the resonance will come back down when the knob is down in percentage. So we'll just bring this down. And we'll bring it down right there, and that should be correct. Let's take a look at how this works. Well, right now the resonance isn't actually doing anything. So let's troubleshoot. What did we do? See, I forgot to connect it. I have to make sure that these are connected right here. If it's not connected, it's not going to do anything. So now we should be controlling the resonance. Yeah, we are. See, when the knob is all the way up, now the resonance is there, but I did it the wrong way. I made it so the resonance is highest when the knob is down. What I need to do is I need the resonance to go downwards when the knob goes down. So I kind of messed up. So I need to go in here and see I brought it to go down here. I actually have to reverse this, right? So let's reverse it, and now it looks like this. Let's pull up the EQ. Now let's try this. There we go. And now it's going down. However, I don't want it to go down all the way. I only want it to go down to about there. You see where that is right there? That's where I want it to go down to. So this is a very trial and error thing. You should really test this out as you're working on it. But basically, let's bring the knob down, and I want this resonance to be there. That's a good resonance spot. So let's copy this value, copy the value, and then go to map, go to this controller, and then paste the value here, because this is where it is going to be if the knob's all the way down. So now we just have this little area selected right here with this envelope controller, and we should be all good now. Let's test this out one more time. Yeah, so as we turn it up, the resonance comes up higher, and then as we turn it down, the resonance goes back down to normal. And the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this right here, this level, is also up to normal when the knob comes down, and then goes down to kind of give space for that resonance to come up. So that's the next thing we want to do. So let's go ahead and copy this value, 32%, and then activate it. So now it's activated. And let's connect it to yet another output. We have 8 of these, remember, so articulator 4 is what we're working with now. So let's connect them, which we forgot to do last time. So now it's connected. Let's go into articulator 4 here, and let's put the value that we copied. Let's paste it right here. So that's when the knob is all the way up. And when the knob is all the way down, it's already right in the middle. We want it right in the middle, because that's where this EQ level is naturally set, right in the middle at 0 dB. So this should be controlled pretty well. Yeah, there it is. You can see it goes up to meet it, and we have a very smooth transition here into telephoning the sound. It's very nice. So I'm a fan of that. I like this a lot. It seems like the EQ part of this is pretty much done. But there's one more thing I want to do. I think I want to go in and make some edits. I think I want to go into articulator 2, which is our high pass, and lower this down a little bit more. And I also want to change this curve. I'm going to change this curve to look a little more like that. If I do this in the extreme way, you can basically see how this would work. It goes down really, really fast, and then it kind of slows down. And pretty much this last half, the high pass filter or the low pass filter will be in the same place for the last half of this knob rotation. Like when I'm at 50% for the knob, it's pretty much at the spot it's going to be at 100%. And you can see this now if I go into the surface. You see it doesn't affect it much, and then it really affects it. So the first quarter is where most of this movement goes on with the high pass filter right here, if you're paying attention to this. And then it slows down and it kind of eases in. And I feel like I want that, but a little more subtle. So let's just smooth out this curve a little bit. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy with that. So that's all good. The EQ portion of this is taken care of. We have a completely dry to a completely wet EQ with this knob. But there's something else I wanted to do. Another thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to make the sound mono. I wanted to make it more mono and less stereo. And the way I can do that is just with a Maximus. Let's open up a Maximus here. Yeah, I can open that up, and let's put this at, well, it can really be at any point before or after this. I'll just go ahead and put it before the parametric EQ. See right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the low, bring that all the way up, so no compression happening. Same with the mid, and same with the high. And also same with the master, actually, because we're not using this for compression, even though it is a compressor. What we're using it for is this knob right here, this merge and separate knob. Merge will make it completely mono, and separated will boost the stereo frequencies. Make it big, sounding big and surrounding stereo. We don't really want that. We want it to be more mono. So what I'm going to do is I just want it to go from here down to here, and that's going to be pretty important. So I'm going to go ahead and activate this. And the value is just at 50%. I can just remember that. And let's use this fruity envelope controller again. Here, let me move this around so you can see what's going on here. So let's use this fruity envelope controller. We have articulators free. I can go in here, go outputs, controllers, articulator 5. And now there's another little dot. So let's connect these two dots. Again, let's move this around so we can see what's going on. So now we've connected those two little dots, and we can go into articulator, what did we say? Was this 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, articulator 5. And continuous output is on. And now we can make sure that this right here is being controlled by this. So let's modulation X mapping. Let's go here. It appears as though it is. But you can see we have it reversed. You see when this knob is all the way up, it's all the way mono, which is what we want. But then it reaches we're at 50% at halfway, and then it comes back down, and we don't want it separated like that. We don't want it separated like that at all. So let's go down here, and let's say in 5, when it's all the way down, I can hold Alt to snap it to the grid. I want it to stop at 50%. So now it's going to stop at 50% in this knob right here. There it is. So now it just monos out the signal, and that kind of helps. I actually enjoy that a lot. I think that makes it a lot better. And one last thing I do want to do, just as a little extra thing here, is I want to add a tad bit of room reverb, just a small bit of reverb. So let's add the reverb plugin. Let's use this let's use it after the parametric EQ, because like if it was coming out of a phone speaker, I'd want it to sound like there's a little bit of room reverb to make it sound like it's not just super dead, like it's actually in a space, which I think would be pretty interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, add a little bit of room reverb, and we can leave the dry where it is. The early reflections, the early reflections are kind of important here, because that sort of makes it sound like it's in something resembling a room. We can kind of change this room, change the difference. Maybe it's in a square room. Yeah, it's weird because it almost sounds like that's what it sounds like when I set my headphones down on my desk and like I'm lit and the headphones are cranked up so I can hear them without them on my head. This is exactly what it sounds like. And it's kind of weird, maybe a little less low end, but it's weird to hear. So now I can turn up the wet a little bit. Let's make the size small. Turn this decay down. Now it sounds like it's in a room. It's like being played by some crappy speaker in a room. And that's what we wanted from this. That's exactly what we wanted from this, actually. But I want to be able to control this separately on this surface here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this, and I'm going to add a slider. I think a slider would be pretty good. We don't have to add another knob. And let me just reorientate this. Properties, orientation, horizontal. Yeah. So we have a nice slider right here. Let's resize this. Yeah. And this is going to be the slider for the reverb. We can control the reverb amount with this. So we want to connect these controls right here to this slider. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do here, I think it will be a little bit easier. Everything that has come out of this Fruity Envelope controller has been modulation X stuff. It's all been connected to this knob. This knob is connected to that. So I think it would be kind of easier to see. It'd be easier for visual purposes if we add a different one right here, a different Fruity Envelope controller, and we use this to control the slider. So what we have to do is we have to say outputs. We want actually a couple of them there because we want to control both the early reflections and the actual wet of the reverb. We want to control both of those with this one. So we want to add 2 of those. And then we want to make sure that modulation X right here, like we did before, is activated. So we have now activated modulation X for all of those. And we can just go ahead and click continuous output just like we did before to make sure that it's constantly controlling whatever it's hooked up to be controlled. So let's go ahead and connect these right there. So now that is connected to the slider. See this top one right here, this top little dot was the knob, and now this one is the slider. So modulation X for this one is connected to the slider. So we have to go into the reverb, and let's activate these. These 2 need to be activated. We have the wet and the early reflections. So let me just go ahead and copy the value of the wet, because this one's at 100%. We need to know the value of the wet. So the wet is going to be controlled by this one right here, number 1. Number 1 is just at the top right there. And we're going to go ahead and deselect the envelope and go into modulation X mapping. And now we can use that. So this would be as if it was just 100%, like there was no envelope controller, like we just put it directly into that knob, or excuse me, the slider. Oh, well, that's different. I actually connected. I thought I was connecting the wet to it, but it turns out I'm actually connecting the early reflections. This is exactly what I wanted, though. I want it to be like zoom 100%. Just right there, 100%. Yeah, I didn't, for this particular modulation, I didn't even need the envelope controller. The result would be exactly the same if I just took this and dragged it right onto this reverb here. You see, it's doing exactly the same thing. So there's literally no need for this envelope controller at all for that one. But there is need for the envelope controller for the other one. So since, just to stay organized, I'm going to make sure that these are connected just all through the same one. This will be everything connected to that slider. It just for organizational purposes, I'm going to keep it that way. Everything connected to the slider is going to be done through this envelope controller. And now I'm going to connect this one right here. And this will be 2. Let's go into 2. And instead of creating this shape that we did before where it went from 0 to 100%, we just wanted to go 0 to like 23. So we want this little area right there. It means this one will stop at 23% when this knob is all the way up. Now you can see we're controlling it like that. As a matter of fact, I actually want to bring that up a little bit. I want to bring it up to 50. Because what if we want that? Like that's the thing. I want to make sure this reverb is strong when we have it all the way up. Because what if I just want it really strong? And another thing I want to do, I actually do kind of want to affect the curve of this early reflections. I want the early reflections to get very dramatic, very quick. So I'm just going to go like this. So now once this knob travels up about halfway, let's see, once the slider travels up about halfway, the early reflections are almost at 100% here. You can see there's only a little bit of space left to cover. And so the rest of this modulation is pretty much solely controlling the room reverb, and I'm completely cool with that. I actually like that a lot. So now we have an interesting thing we did here. I think that pretty much wraps up this. I've created this in today's video, and what it does is it kind of telephones things. And I can control the reverb level. And I think this plugin is actually pretty useful to me. I'll probably go back later and adjust the names of these because you can go into here and you can change the colors and the styles. Let's say I want the style. I could say glow dot. I think that's a pretty interesting one. I think I use that for a different one. Maybe heavy metal. Doesn't really work for me, but I'd have to go back and customize it later. But the point is we've made the plugin, the plugin, and now we can save it. And this effect is actually pretty useful to me. So I'm going to go ahead and then save this preset. And all the ones that I make right here that are kind of complicated, I just put the HQ in front of it. This would be telephone. And there we have this plugin. You could throw this on anything. This is just a patcher. Like I can go ahead, since I saved this, I can go ahead and delete it. And then just open up Patcher and go up here, hit HQ Telephone, and here I am. So there we go. I think that pretty much covers how I would go about making an effect plugin such as this. Again, this is just an example of one you can make. I showed some examples of other ones that I made before, utilizing different techniques. You can get a lot more complicated than this. You can also do stuff that's a lot simpler than this. It's really just about what you want to do and just understanding that the basic concept of it is basically you have all your effects in there and you have something such as the Fruity Envelope controller or even like the Fruity XY controller, the Fruity XYZ controller that allows you to connect those effects to different knobs and controls inside the surface. And those controllers, the envelope controllers, the XY controllers, stuff like that, will let you determine how the knob controls that particular effect that you're controlling. So it does get a little bit complicated, but that's basically the chain that I wanted you to understand. Is you go plug in the controller and then the actual knob or slider or whatever you want to add in the actual surface. I feel like I'm saying the word actual a lot. Actual.
actual.
So that is the actual end of the actual video. We really appreciate you guys for watching, and we actually would really appreciate if you go down and actually hit subscribe. You can actually comment if you want to. That's another thing that you can do. You can actually leave a like, and that would actually also be really appreciated. So I will actually see you guys in the next video. Happy producing. Actually.